The Assembly will hear an address by His Eminence Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Secretary of State of the Holy See. I request protocol to escort His Eminence and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, I am honored to extend to you and to the representatives of the nations assembled here the warm greetings of His Holiness Pope Francis, while also congratulating Your Excellency on your election as President of this esteemed Assembly. Mr. President, the Holy See is deeply concerned that we are witnessing a worrying increase in the number of conflicts worldwide and the severity of their violence. These conflicts are responsible for a significant loss of innocent life and a vast amount of destruction. 75 years after the ratification of the Geneva Conventions, humanitarian law is still being undermined and increasingly being violated. The targeting of places of worship, educational institutions, medical facilities, and other civil infrastructure is a prevalent phenomenon. The Holy See calls for the strict observance of international humanitarian law in all armed conflicts. The situation becomes more complex when one considers the destabilizing role often played by violent non-state actors in many of the crises around the globe. It is imperative that these groups seek a constructive engagement with states, renounce violence and acts of terrorism, and enter into legality. Peace is only possible if it is wanted. The pursuit of peace is a collective responsibility. It is imperative to move beyond rhetoric and the tendency to ascribe blame. However, the reality is that there is no genuine commitment to achieving peace. In times of conflict, there is often a tendency to prioritize military victory over the pursuit of peace. It is incumbent upon diplomacy to demonstrate unwavering dedication to pursuing every avenue for negotiation to establish enduring peace. To pursue peace, however, it is not enough simply to eliminate the instruments of war. Its root causes must be eradicated. Foremost among these is hunger, a scourge that continues to afflict entire areas of our world, while others are marked by massive waste of food. Nevertheless, the prevailing tendency has been to maintain the growth in military expenditure, while striving to fulfill the commitments made on sustainable development. Pope Francis appeals to rich countries to acknowledge the gravity of so many of their past decisions and determined to forgive the debts of countries that will never be able to repay them. It is easy to become complacent and resigned in the face of the constant stream of new forms of poverty. However, this dramatic situation can be encountered all around us, not only in certain parts of the world. This is the case, for example, of the modern phenomenon of homelessness. Poverty has a particularly detrimental impact on women, often trapping them in a vicious cycle of unfortunate circumstances, resulting in isolation and abandonment before they are forced to make desperate and unwelcome decisions. Pope Francis says The path to peace calls for a respect for life, for every human life, starting with the life of the unborn child in the mother's womb, which cannot be suppressed or turned into an objective of trafficking. The practice of so-called surrogate motherhood represents a grave violation of the dignity of both the woman and the child, based on the exploitation of situation of the mother's material needs. The Holy See hopes for an effort by the international community to prohibit this practice universally. The dignity of migrants must be upheld. People seeking refuge must be not rejected, but welcomed with respect and a sense of humanity. Another affront to human dignity is trafficking human beings. This illegal and above all dehumanizing practice must be stopped and the traffickers brought to justice. Closely related to the dignity of human life is the care of our common home. The effects of climate change are borne by the poorest countries, who contribute the least to it, but are those who carry the greatest burden of its effects. Opportunities and risks are also given by the rise of new technologies, particularly artificial intelligence. There is a need to ensure and safeguard a space for proper human control over choices made by artificial intelligence. In light of the tragedy that is armed conflict, it is urgent to reconsider the development and use of devices like the so-called lethal autonomous weapons and ultimately ban their use. No machine should ever choose to take the life of a human being. There is a necessity for the establishment of a binding ethical and regulatory framework to be negotiated both within the non-military and military domains. The Holy See is convinced that a world free from nuclear weapons is both necessary and possible. The goal of a world free of nuclear weapons can only be achieved through discussions based on mutual trust. It is evident that the adherence to and respect for international disarmament agreements and international law should not be perceived as a form of weakness. The Holy See renews its call for a total and complete disarmament. Unfortunately, as Pope Francis says, we are witnessing a third world war fought piecemeal. In the midst of the ongoing tragedy of the Russian war in Ukraine, we are faced with a situation that calls for urgent action to prevent further escalation and to create a path towards a just and peaceful resolution. While diplomatic efforts are crucial, it is evident that military engagement continues to prevail. It is therefore essential to find ways to encourage gestures of goodwill and spaces for direct dialogue between the parties involved. The Holy See continues to be worried about the ongoing stability in the Middle East, particularly following the terrorist attack of 7 October 2023 in Israel by Hamas and other armed Palestinian groups. However, the military response by Israel, considering the high number of civilian casualties, raises many questions about its proportionality. The Holy See calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the West Bank, as well as the release of Israeli hostages in Gaza, and urges humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian population. The Holy See reaffirmed that the only viable solution is a two-state solution with Jerusalem having a special status. The Holy See expresses serious concern regarding the situation in Jerusalem, where several discriminations and harassments are taking place, hindering the peaceful coexistence for Christians, Jews, and Muslims. It condemns all anti-Christian acts perpetrated months ago by a minority of Jewish individuals and calls on the authorities to continue confronting this ideological deviation firmly and clearly. The current situation in Lebanon represents a significant cause for concern for the Holy See. The ongoing intensification of the conflict between Hezbollah and the Israeli military is putting at high risk the whole region. The Holy See demands that all parties adhere to the principles of international humanitarian law and halt the escalation and enter into a ceasefire without delay. Furthermore, the Holy See highlights the humanitarian crisis in Syria and urges the international community to do more in supporting the Syrian people who feel hopeless about their future. The ongoing armed conflict in Sudan has resulted in an unprecedented humanitarian crisis, with displaced persons, particularly women and children, succumbing to starvation and malnutrition. The Holy See urges the international community to promote peace negotiations and provide the population with vital humanitarian aid. The Holy See calls for more humanitarian support in the Cabo Delgado province in Mozambique, affected by armed conflict for 7 years now, with almost 905,000 internally displaced persons who are facing alarming levels of suffering, insecurity, and poverty. The situation in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo is deteriorating rapidly, leading to a disturbing increase in the humanitarian crisis. The withdrawal of the MONUSCO by the end of the year is likely to create a security vacuum. It is crucial to continue supporting diplomatic efforts to find an appropriate and sustainable solution to the ongoing conflict. The Holy See follows with great preoccupation the social political situation in South Sudan, aggravated by the humanitarian crisis, the recent floods, and the conflict. It calls on the international community to show solidarity with the population and urges all the country's leaders to place the well-being of the people at the center of their political agenda. The spread of jihadist threats in the Gulf of Guinea is causing concern for the security of not just the Sahel, but all of West Africa. Christians are being targeted, while climate change and armed attacks are worsening the food crisis and causing children to drop out of school. Immediate and long-term action is needed to prevent a loss of education and stability in the region. The Holy See is following the dramatic situation in Haiti with apprehension and hopes that the steps that are being taken with the support of the international community to establish democratic order and stop the violence will lead to peace and reconciliation in the country. The dramatic situation and the dire need for humanitarian aid in Myanmar, which has been exacerbated by an increase in armed conflict in recent months and made worse by severe flooding, are also a source of deep concern. The Holy See calls on all parties to seek a durable, peaceful solution to the situation and to ensure access for humanitarian aid to all affected communities without prejudice. The Holy See follows with great attention to what is happening in Nicaragua. It is in particular concerned about the measures taken against the personnel and institutions of the Church, which directly affect the sensitive issues of religious freedom. It is hoped that in conjunction with the other fundamental rights of individuals and society, this freedom will be adequately guaranteed. For its part, the Holy See is open to respectful and constructive dialogue with the authorities of the country, with a view to resolving difficulties and promoting peace, fraternity, and harmony for the benefit of all. The recent presidential elections in Venezuela have demonstrated that despite the numerous challenges faced, the Venezuelan people continue to place their trust in the democratic values enshrined in the Constitution. These democratic values are founded upon the sovereignty of the people, which is expressed through the act of voting. In the serious crisis that followed the announcement of the result, with several deaths, numerous detentions, also of minors, and the use of violence, the Holy See, deeply saddened and worried, appeals to the authorities of the country and to all those who have any responsibility for what has happened to respect and protect the life, dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms of its citizens. Furthermore, it calls upon them to seek ways to resolve the present situation for the good of all, including with the assistance of members of the international community who have declared themselves willing to help in a flexible and reasonable manner. The Holy See encourages the talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan so that they may continue the dialogue, assist the displaced persons, respect the places of worship of the different religious denominations, and reach a final peace treaty between the parties as soon as possible. The Holy See looks also favorably on the aspiration of the Balkans countries to join the European Union and hopes that this objective will be achieved as soon as possible. While disarmament fosters peace among nations, there is also a need to foster peace within societies through democracy. It is the result of a considered and committed acceptance of the values that inspire democratic procedures. Democracy is founded upon the tenets of freedom of expression and the fundamental principle of the respect for the will of the people. This implies that changes in the orders of power can occur. However, there is an increasing tendency to alter constitutions or to modify electoral rules and procedures for the purpose of remaining in power. Democracy entails respect for the established rules and the recognition of the expressed will of the people. Pope Francis made it clear that the path to peace calls for respect for human rights. Regrettably, in recent decades, attempts have been made to introduce new rights, leading to instances of ideological colonization, in which gender theory plays a central role. The latter cancels differences in its claim to make everyone equal. It does not even help ensuring the harmony between women and men. It is also inconceivable to associate the concept of right with the practice of abortion, which involves the taking of an innocent life. The Holy See is profoundly alarmed that some of the most common violations of human rights occur in the area of religious freedom. Christians are the most vulnerable in this regard, where 1 in 7 are subjected to persecution. Mr. President, there is a need to recover the roots, the spirit, and the values that gave rise to this organization, while at the same time taking into account the changed context. The first and most necessary reform needed is the return to a sincere and open dialogue. It is evident that without dialogue and an open exchange of perspectives, even when there is disagreement, consensus and agreement cannot be reached. The Holy See as it has done in these last 6 decades of presence at the UN, continues to support the work of the organization, making its voice heard in defense of the poor, of those in vulnerable situations, supporting every peace process and initiative. Thank you, Mr. President.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Secretary of State of the Holy See